solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. And welcome. In the Ice Age Conversations podcast, going to add Ransom Godwin in here tonight. Calling you from overseas, halfway across the planet. Taipei. Tonight, the scatter wave continues. We're going to read the broadcasted news across the planet. Scatter wave interfere with your thoughts, ideas, so you can't notice the change is kind of what we're seeing on the airwaves at the moment. It doesn't matter where you look. Over in Asia, it is furiously buy gold, buy more gold, get ready, the change is coming. You got to buy gold, all citizens buy gold. That's the messaging here. The U.S. troops in the Taiwan Islands, nobody in Taiwan seems to care. It's barely even making the front page news is over here, but across America, it's a terrifying news story. Everywhere you look, excuse me. Everywhere you look, it's just another terrifying news story. Oh, the eclipse is coming. The world's going to end. Be afraid. They're bending your fear response. If this is reaching your ears from the United States, don't believe anything you're hearing outside in the world right now. Everything is made to terrify you, to control you more. As we walk through the scatter wave, what I'm seeing out here in Asia, I was just in Japan. It's functioning fine, except for the currency devaluation, which is 50% dropped because they sold their treasury bonds. Other than that, there's no war on the horizon. I'm sitting here in Taiwan. They don't consider any war on the horizon. Yet if I was to get the news back in America, oh, they're ready. There's troops right here. They're like 10 feet offshore, ready to land with their landing craft. It's not. It is a facade, what you're seeing across the scatter wave fear belt in America. And as we come with the eclipse is coming next week. They're going to drive the fear. Oh, the New Madrid's going to go off. Oh, the power's going to go out. Oh, it's going to be a grid down. Oh, it's going to be that. Oh, it's going to be this. It's going to be a regular eclipse that happens twice a year across the planet for millions of years. You can see the fear being driven home like a spike right through the vampire's heart. Everywhere. We went to Turkey. Do I see turkeys running around and at the brink of war? No. We went to Croatia on the brink of war and European war front? No. Went up to Italy, northern Italy, went through Slovenia. Are we on the brink of war there? No. So everywhere we look, this thing is super confined. We were going to go to Hungary. We're planning to go to Hungary next week, actually on the 7th. Brink of war, it's right there on the Ukrainian. So I'm calling up there. I got some friends. I'm like, hey man, what's going on? We're going to come on in. We're going to fly in. Hey, we got a good week and a half. You want to go to some museums? We'll hit some ancient sites up there. Rock me around, show me some old megalithic stones. And like, yeah, man, come on. I was like, what about the war up there? Isn't it right at the front? I mean, you're on the border with Ukraine. And they're like, no. And there's people I trust to give me the truth. Like if it's dangerous, they're not going to say, come on over to a dangerous spot. This is ridiculous, the fear bending and mongering that's going on inside the United States news media. Do not buy it. It is distracting you from something larger happening. I've been working on a news story today for those of you who follow the Adapt 2030 channel. Food prices up and up, corn up, wheat up, soybean up, coffee up, almost every agricultural product up, and more farms are closing. And we see now traders on the record publicly coming out, yeah, we're just going to manipulate agricultural prices to get as much money as we can. Doesn't matter if the consumer gets stuck, don't care. We're just going to manipulate the prices. At that point, DOJ should go investigate for these groups of traders saying they're going to bend price to charge as high to get this thing to run to the moon for them to make as much profit as they can. Is that what's being disguised? Crop losses across the planet? I don't know. Food prices are getting rather ridiculous everywhere I've been, though. I must say one thing. Food prices up across the planet. The whole war front of we're going into a world war like immediately doesn't seem to manifest when you actually get out of the United States. When you see it on the ground, it ain't what it is in the news. Let's say that. It is a fear fest beyond fear fests. If it was Oktoberfest, you'd be drunk on fear, laying on the ground with another couple of mega pints dripping all over you because you spilled them while you fell to the ground of fear. That's how much it is there. Don't believe it. It is fictitious. And, that's what Ransom wants to talk about tonight with myself again. Where do we sit in this scatter wave? And why is it that they need to put so much fear into the Americans right now? It wasn't nearly like that in Italy or Croatia. I didn't see that like incredible fear base everywhere. Serbia, right next door to Croatia, going off into nearly a civil war again. And people are just sitting there having their coffees, reading the newspaper, nothing really. I'm trying to read the news, see what's happening. They're not talking about the global conflict. They're talking about higher taxes and inflation. But the whole war thing you're seeing is just a U.S. mirage, and the U.S. industrial complex, military, also manufacturing, shipping, energy, all coming together to make you feel in the United States like your world is falling apart. And I'm telling you right here, right now, it is not. You are living in a mirage back in America with this fear. So anyway, Ransom, thanks for joining me. I could ramble for a minute. I want to stop myself because I'm just going to say, I'm just going to start getting outraged here on how fake everything is back in America that we're seeing right now in terms of what I'm seeing on the ground with my real eyes, with my own brain, assessing the situation. I'm here in Taiwan. Do you think and people are like, oh, the Chinese are coming tomorrow. No, they're not. Yeah, they're running some things around out there on the Penghu Islands, or not Penghu, excuse me, on Jinmen Island. But otherwise, everything cozy, sleeping good at night. It's just ridiculous the amount of fear that's being thrown at us. I don't get it. I just don't understand it. Why is it so focused, laser focused on America? Like a laser beam from the sky. I wish we had blue roofs in America. We could bounce the fear off. Anyway, Ransom, I digress. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. Yeah, they like to misdirect what's going on. Definitely. I mean, we have, the border being overrun at the same time as it's not happening. They say it's not happening. It's definitely not what you're looking at. So if you're watching video of that happening, that's not true, according to our government. But what is true is that they're worried about all of these other things that take the attention off of what they're doing and what kind of corruption and things that they're doing over here. But let's look at this messaging from NASA. NASA to send disc depicting essence of humanity to the moon. They're making another little Noah's Ark of information just in case, something happens here. But I've been kind of feeling like Nostradamus, actually. I mean, everything I'm predicting, I'm watching on the news. And like you said, you got to take it with a grain of salt. How much is it is propaganda? How much of it is designed to send you into a fear mode so that you are distracted about taking care of yourself and prepping for yourself or planning ahead in the future for yourself? It's kind of like the Bible thing where they tell everybody, hey, don't worry about it, and that way they kind of just stop trying to interact with their world now because, it'll all be okay in the end, I guess. But, I'm an hour north of the border and I'm watching, video of a place I know very well. And, they got it, and it almost looks like I'm going to go ahead and say a movie set. Because you have like National Guard armed to the teeth, right? And they're sitting there pushing people and they're tearing down this specific part of the fence. There's a lot of fence and they're not going towards all of it to do these kind of things. This seems like a more of I don't want to say it's staged for television, but it's definitely staged on different levels. One of them is that they have NGOs pushing these groups in, telling them when to go, when to push, when to distract. Think about that. When one thing's happening on the border, something else is probably happening somewhere else without the eye on it. But I'm also seeing here's one that I've been telling people for a long time. They've been beating you over the head like a dead horse about the world's population continuing to spiral out of control. And I've been telling people that the overpopulation, idea is a myth, and that the world's population would soon stop and plateau and actually start reversing. And here's today's Telegraph. World's population to fall for the first time since the Black Death. I don't know why that's happening. I mean, like over in Ukraine, there's almost no men left in their villages there. And global fertility rates keep plummeting, according to study after study after study. And then, like I said, I wonder why the population would be, going down when you have localized combat zones that are just. I mean, think about this. I've been, tripping a lot into genetics, and when I really started thinking about how the paternal and the maternal DNA express themselves in the world, so you get a representation of some of the earliest people on Earth through mitochondrial DNA, and you have this chain, this unending chain through time of survivors, of people that made it through, had children, and those children had children. And so you look from the mother to the mother to the mother to the mother, mother, daughter for all kinds, and you get your maternal haptype. And then you have the father to the father to the father, all the way back into antiquity of the paternal haptype. And, I was just thinking the other day, so if every family that has children, say a man and a woman have two children, both of them are girls, that paternal haptype ends with that family. So if he didn't have brothers or anything, that's gone. And when I think about China, it was a cultural thing for a while, to have less girls. Let's just put it that way. And think of the millions of maternal haptypes that just disappeared off the face of the earth, because a whole generation of mothers did not have daughters who would have more daughters, and they're just gone off the earth. And then when you look around at this fertility thing, it's hard to talk about it without admitting that it goes hand in hand with first world countries and their lifestyles there, from the medicine to the food to the overall, lifestyle of comfort of living into a first world country. And that's all falling apart. And Ukraine is actually a good example of what they want to slowly do to nation by nation. And I know there's a lot of people that are on both sides of the fence. Now, think about it from a third party point of view, where you don't have a vested interest in either side of it culturally, and you're just looking at it. You'll realize that the Ukrainian people are going to disappear. They're going to disappear because, well, from one side, they're being paid and armed and thrown into the meat grinder. And on the other side, well, they're grinding the meat. So all of the men who would pass down their Ukrainian, if you want to call it that, paternal haptypes that go back into history, they're disappearing off of the face of the earth, never to be seen again, especially if they were the only son in their family. And the same goes for like people that are deciding not to have children all over the world. They're ending millions of years of struggle and survival and adaptation and, dealing with the environment and wars and governments all throughout time to make it to the present, to just decide that, well, that was enough of that. I guess we're not going to do that anymore. But I am feeling like Nostradamus. Combat zones are showing up right here along the border, and over in the Western hemisphere, you have Haiti, you got the Dominican Republic building a 14-foot wall across it to keep people out, because they know that that's so unstable, it's about to spread. And I'm kind of glad that you're getting a chance to go everywhere. Because that's how it works. The last time I traveled, I remember I went places and it was a certain way, a certain place, but now it's not. Like I used to live in DC, and it was pretty open for the most part, but now it's kind of weird. You see this soft martial law setting up everywhere, and they're using random, excuses for it. crime in the subway, that, okay, you got crime in the subway and you can't afford with your, multi-million-dollar budgets every year to have enough people in the right places, which doesn't make sense. And then you got the hype up of the eclipse, like somehow a shadow moving across the earth that's going to sway gravity somehow. And I've been seeing a lot of smart people pushing that idea. Like Mike Adams the other day had a post that was talking about that. And I'm like, how is the shadow going to change the gravity? It's not. That's the answer. So it's just a shadow going over the earth. And like you said, it happens yearly, at least twice a year, somewhere on earth it's happening. That's one of those things that people put a lot of meaning into that, it doesn't necessarily have any meaning, but they're going to put it in there. However, for those people out there that are provocateurs and different things, this is the perfect opportunity to have lots of people in large amounts in certain areas through a swath of America. So that's kind of what it is the government is not only probably propping up a fabled fear, but also a possible real fear of lunatics, acting under the moon there, and the whole thing. Like you can go back into antiquity, and this has always been an important event for those people that have a small idea of the universe and really don't understand the basic mechanics of their planet, moon, and solar system. It does seem like a divine, inspiring event. And it gets to a lot of people mentality, especially if you keep pumping fear, like you were saying, and they constantly do that. But the problem with that is that they do that incrementally to you so that you get used to the fear mongering and don't respond to real threats. So you could probably go back to World War II, and there were people sitting in France and Poland the day before something happened, drinking their coffee, reading their newspapers, living their life as usual. And the very next day, everything changed. There were tanks in the streets and people being shot and things like that. That happens overnight. And, just the idea that you're safe in one of these places, that the governments continually antagonize each other and have plans to make billions of dollars off of destroying and rebuilding things, which is the main part of the money that is brought in from the military-industrial complex, you'd realize it's in their benefit to destabilize areas. And that's why I think we're getting bombarded so much here in the United States specifically, because we're one of the nations that has been targeted for destabilization. And that's why we have a wide open border. We're telling people they can come in. And now you're seeing videos coming out of the third world, realizing that there's a lot of legal loopholes in the United States, one of those being squatting on someone's house that's not there. And, all you have to do is fix a light fixture or, fix the doorknob and change the doorknob. And now you've got a bill that you can present to the owner. And in a lot of states in the United States, they allow that person to just sit there in your house, and it can take from months to years to get those people out of your house, and you may lose the house in the end due to our government not respecting us in any way, shape, or form as the citizen, and opening up opportunities. I'm sure that you've been watching different things. They have different rulings from the Supreme Court going on, and so far, every time it seems like they rule, it's against the American people. But just the other day, they ruled that people that are in the country, illegal invaders or aliens or undocumented, whatever you want to call them, you can pick your lingo, because everybody wants to fight about definitions and words. But whatever the case, the Supreme Court says you guys can have guns, but the citizens are restricted and can only have them in certain places at certain times, in certain ways, in certain areas. And they're doing this on purpose to antagonize the population. And, like I said, it's just like Nostradamus. You remember a while back, we were talking long before all of the planes started falling apart in the skies. We were talking about how they've cut inspections, they've cut jobs, they've outsourced the jobs to other countries where there are nobody inspecting it. And I did, like a big portion of show notes on that topic. And now, right afterwards, like months afterwards, we see all of these planes just falling apart for whatever reason you want to blame that on. And it just keeps going on. So over here in the Western world, they are systematically collapsing it. And you can be sitting there drinking your coffee and reading the news and not worry about it. And the next day, your streets are combat zones. I mean, that's happened over and over again through history. So the idea that it wouldn't happen all of a sudden, I don't know about that. So you can be complacent, and or you can not be complacent, but you don't have to be afraid constantly. You just got to read where it's going, and where it's going is AI. AI is going to take over every aspect of everything, and this is going to be the soft weapon used against the economies and populations. And I'll tell you how that's done. And a lot of people are on the trip, the same as me, is automakers recording everything you do. So all of the new AI and devices that are going to be coming out, of course, they're not going to make your life any better, but they will keep track of you a lot better for their new system. So automakers recording your driving habits. We kind of talked about that years ago. This guy, Ben Gortel, or what, I can't say his last name right. Anyway, he's a futurist. Another prediction, AI will surpass human intelligence by 2027. And as I mentioned last week, we don't have to wait for that. We have coders who have already created AI that can now do their jobs for them. In other words, they have created AI that can write and create AI. It can make games, it can make apps, it can make movies. The sky is the limit with where it's going. And the only, kind of moderation of this is coming from the government, but it ain't towards them. It's towards you. So anything that you're creating, they're going to be saying it's kind of misinformation, or you can't use it, or it's not real. And then the simple fact that we're in a time now where it's easily provable that you cannot believe anything you see, read, or hear. It can all be stolen, and it all could be generated. And, just a couple of weeks ago, some of the new platforms of AI generation, video generation came out. And I'm saying they're so close to reality that you won't be able to tell the difference, which brings up, can you believe what you see? What if you live in a country and they're showing you a bunch of news all over the world that makes it seems like it's completely fallen apart and over, but in reality, like David was talking about, in those areas, they never heard about it. They don't know that's the way the world sees them, because they don't get the same misinformation and news that you get. We've also talked about this. Wendy's is going to be delivering food by drone for the first time. So you're going to start seeing this more and more, the little stupid robots, the little drones delivering your food. And here's articles talking about these are the jobs that will be most impacted by AI. And they go through the normal ones that you would think: business, art, finance, customer sales, all of the things that don't really require a human being to push buttons and do things. Those jobs are all going to disappear, but those aren't the ones you're going to watch. You want to really pay attention to. The jobs that you want to pay attention to disappearing are in manufacturing. And those jobs are going to be done better with AI. And they're going to be using excuses like planes falling apart, for example, or in this case, of the article I'm showing right now, to save soldiers' lives by, hooking up new systems that use AI for better killing and better warfare. And that's where they're going with a lot of those jobs. And then, like I said, as a mark of the times, we're sending discs to depict the human essence, as if they were waiting for some kind of event just around the corner to collapse what we've got going on. So I do agree with you that the fear porn is skyrocketing, but at the same time, that's what they always do to people, is keep the fear level up. So once they up it again, you're just sitting there going, I knew that was going to happen, whatever. But really, you should be taking it serious. You shouldn't get too complacent about any situation or level of civility in your area, because we know it can fall apart rather quick within a day. Within weeks, if it's something economic or related to the power. But as far as it goes to war, I mean, it's true that Taiwan might be sitting there thinking, well, it's never going to happen because it hasn't happened. But like I said, many other countries and the people that lived in there also thought the same thing. And then the next day, there were troops walking around in the streets. So I don't know how you want to look at that. It's both true. It is falling apart, but at the same time, it's not falling apart in the way that they say it is. Then they're trying to make people look in the wrong direction while they change things that you're not looking at, like the cost of food, how they produce food, distributed. All of these things, like take care of you or take care of those things. Government is supposed to do, but not when they choose. And I think a problem right now across America is allurophobia or illurophobia. Maybe I didn't. I'm pretty sure it's allurophobia, the fear of freedom. And they say this goes back to, back in biblical days, people were afraid to be free. And I think the same thing is true now. And they know that the fear mongering, they could use that to keep people's mentality busy and down and demoralized to the point where they don't actually take care of the things that they need to take care of, first themselves, then their family, and then their community, and then their country. And they make it seem like, that's not really what's going on. You need to fight the greater of two evils there. Everything's about the election cycle and how the economy is. But when it comes down to it, you have empty suits arguing about going the same direction with everything. When it comes down to it, they always go with the I'm gonna say shadow government's decisions rather than the citizenry, and I think that's true everywhere. You're getting a good chance to travel around, and it's really cool. And I was going to ask you about that. With the lack of mockingbird media, is basically what you described. There are billions, really, of people around the world that don't know that some of these things are going on. Some of these things are not really going on, but they're being told that they're going on. And in the backdrop of all of that, there is a technological singularity happening in pharmaceuticals, in biology, all of it. It's surpassing human civilization to the point where AI is the only thing that they're going to have to offer to back up things as far as knowledge. And we already know, just looking at Google right now, speaking of which, they just changed the definition of bloodbath to not include like a financial bloodbath that everybody in business or has paid attention to the Wall Street or any election knows that those terms are always used. And it doesn't mean actually hurting or doing something to anybody. It just means that there's big winners and there's big losers. But they went ahead and changed the definition of that. And you would be surprised on how many words have been changed. Because if you can change the meaning of words, you can change arguments. You can change legal arguments. You can change the way people live because they don't want to associate with a certain word that might be beneficial or an idea because they think it's been changed. So the whole thing we're living in is a fake reality generated by the programmers. The programmers we don't get to see. It's not those goofy kids at MIT that say they came up with stuff. Even if they did and are the first ones that came up with those things, you can bet that the military industrial complex will confiscate it, copy it, or control it in some way, because the whole game now in this era of civilization we're in is to pull the wool over the eyes, to fake everything. It's a dissimulation. Everything is fake that you see, but inside that fakeness are real dangers. And any time, as we've seen in the past, drills or things like that, things that aren't real can become real at a moment's notice.
We need to defibrillate the economy. Those of you who are fans of electrical devices out there, yeah, that term that Ransom speaks about is called news speak. That originated in George Orwell's 1984 novel. Control language, control critical thinking. Again, what the Ministry of Peace, now it's the Ministry of Language, and it seems like the totalitarian two-step, frightened people, isolated individuals. I was reading an article earlier they were calling it the atomization of society. Or if you can shatter everything that people are used to as a natural way of life, the connection with society, twist the language, isolate people from each other. Hey, wait. Every one of those check the box has occurred over the last 4 years. No family, no community, no solace. We call it atomization. And then, you and I discussed this, Ransom, before, where the bending of reality to not include a physical reality, because that way you won't have any rights, you won't have any property rights, you won't have any ownership of anything. If you can bend what the physical construct of physical reality is, and that slides right in with virtual reality, because if you're in virtual reality, and then watch when they try to slide the two definitions between what virtual reality is and what physical reality is on your home ownership, right? So you can see how the language is being twisted in so many facets on just even the simplest of things. There's a house there, I own it. Oh no, not with the new language. You might not, because they're talking about the rewilding of this, the taxes on that, the meat tax, the CO2 tax, everything that we're looking at here. The massive amount of cattle destruction, not only with incredible super freezes that have wiped out a huge amount of Mongolian beef production this year. You don't realize that there's massive beef production in Mongolia as well, but the herds are, they froze millions and millions and millions of animals. And that also goes with northern China and those same border areas, Inner Mongolia. Mongolia is the country itself, the border periphery there with China and Neimungu, which is Inner Mongolia. That area experienced the coldest freeze in over 150 years, of temperatures that went so cold that bovine are pretty large animals, but when they start to circle in a herd, then they'll take turns coming in and out of the center to rewarm themselves. But when the entire herd in a circle of hundreds and hundreds of animals trying to stay warm all freeze to death completely, something's very, very different. That's more like a directed storm ripping it across the Arctic on purpose to drive these incredibly low temperatures into animal production facility areas. Because you look at it, what was that super freeze that occurred that almost everybody forgot about now in the United States just about a month and a half ago? It was the coldest temperatures in 150 years came ripping through. The same thing. A lot of sheep got frozen, a lot of livestock frozen. There's a huge amount of chickens. They couldn't keep the houses insulated enough, froze. You look at the incredible amount of damage the cold did in the United States to our what you consider meat and protein industry. Well, the same exact copy paste thing just happened over in Asia. So now we're looking at two massive places in the world, and then all the legislation, litigiousness of it, removal of anything on four legs across Europe. Now you're seeing a predominant amount of the Northern Hemisphere just lost either through natural means or legislative means meat production for the year, which is one of the reasons that your food price is going to absolutely, they had a couple pennants in the stock charts of the cattle trades, because you got a lot of guys trade on that, either the hogs or the cattle. But everywhere you look, it's breaking out into, if you follow stock trading, it is absolutely moving upward. It's broken out of its kind of slotted channel where it gets locked in price, because it sort of gains some equilibrium in there. But the gargantuan moves that are expected in this are just as much as the 150-year cold shocked people down in Florida. The prices of your food are absolutely going to shock the entire planet coming up as we move forward here. And one thing alluding to when you're talking about the Aztecs and the Mayans and that sort of thing, in the ancient times of when eclipses came, and the priests knew the duration of the eclipse and when it would, the cycle of the eclipse, and one day it would occur. Just the average peasant or the average citizen wouldn't know that information. So then those on high that had the advanced information that was hidden from the public would go, there will be an eclipse. We will turn off the sun if you don't obey us. And then suddenly like apocalypto, the sun suddenly blocks out. But this time we may see the devil's comet. And here's another thing. It's just numbers, not fear. The devil's comet comes around every 71 years, which is interestingly close to Strauss and Howe's 80-year cycle of abundance and contraction. The cycle is 80 years for Strauss and Howe, the fourth turning. So it's pretty interesting that this Devil's Comet arrives around the decline phase of the fourth turning every time. Now give it 5 or 6 more durations and it'll be off about 10 years. Give it 8 more times and it should occur right at the rebirth after the destruction of the collapse period into what you consider like the Roaring 20s period again. But wherever this Devil Comet in our several lifetimes is going to make its appearance is in this falling off, destruction, contraction phase of the fourth turning in the 80-year cycle. So knowing that it was in this construct or distraction cycle for the last 3 times as well, which brings us into this last part of the fourth turning downward again. So is it an average of 80 years? Yeah, it could be 79, but is it exactly 71 years or is it 71.8 years? You know, then you start to get into this variance of a year either side of the Strauss and Howe models or the comet when it's coming around on it. Because, you know, when they do out news articles, they're not going to be very precise, like 71.21897. You know, they're just going to say 72, 71 years. They're going to round it up, round it down. So that overlap of a couple years after a few cycles turns into something, you know, an extra whole one loop of that, you know, orbit of the comet coming back difference. So think about it. The Devil's Comet appears now. We're in a decline phase. Eclipse is coming. We might be able to see this thing without any use of telescopes during the eclipse. Now think about how all this is lining up for those who don't understand basic workings of our universe, workings of the heavens. Again, is it any different than a Mayan priest 500 years ago compared to today when the news media is running around, oh, there's going to be a comet, the Devil's Comet, you know, they have to put it the name. It couldn't be just like a two-horned electrical dipole comet that's glowing on each end of electrical connectivity in the equilibrium of electromagnetism comet. Nope, it has to be the Devil's Comet. It's dirty snowball still, which is amazing for me. Like, you got all this information out there about the electric universe. We know these comets are solid rock. They're just different polarity, different charge, positive, negative. And as it gets closer to the sun, those opposite charges are trying to equalize. A comet, obviously, dissipates its charge as it goes way past Pluto or however far it goes, and it loses its charge that it picked up from the sun, and then it picks up another charge, which is the opposite, which is far out past where our sun's field is really strong. When it comes back in, it's a different charge. You got positive and negative. So as they get closer to equilibrium, one of them is glowing, and that would be our comet. So don't look at comet as a dirty snowball. Look at it as an electric comet. And this is a whole other thing that we should be talking about too, is with the electric comet being visible, the Devil's electric comet, not dirty snowball. At that point, if you're able to see it as it reaches full halo there of eclipse on the sun, should we not be talking about drawing electricity out of the atmosphere and going away from combustion? I mean, the whole thing is about we're destroying the planet. Yeah, there's a perfectly viable solution to not destroy the planet any longer in terms of combustion or mining, or, you know, you would need some mining, but not at the level it is now, because we wouldn't need so much copper cabling. We wouldn't need so much pipe to drill for oil. We wouldn't need the rigs to go looking for oil. You know, a huge amount of infrastructure could be stopped on a dime that we would need to build or repair if we went to this new system. But of course, they're not going to let you do that. They're just going to put you back in a box and go, Devil's Comet, eclipse is coming over the New Madrid fault zone, be scared and pay your homage to the priests, is kind of the way I'm looking at it on this thing. Now watch more for this Devil's Comet thing to come out. I encourage you to do your research on what an electric comet is, not the dirty snowball theory, which we've been fed ad nauseum. That has been disproven for a while, at least 20 years. I'll be conservative and say 20. It's actually further back, but this peasant, down-talking, news speak atomization that we've entered this phase here. You know, it wouldn't surprise me, and as you alluded, that Wendy's is going to use drone deliveries for the food. Now, walk me out a couple steps on this, and eventually there's going to be a CO2 tax to use the drone, because the electricity produced to charge the drone to give it and get it to you is going to be a CO2 electrical tax on top, just to use the drone to get you the food. Every way, shape, and form that we're going to use anything in the future is going to have a tax associated with it, because you had to generate electricity, you had to move fossil fuels somehow to get it to you, which then in turn, when it combusts, creates different gases. Amongst one of them would be CO2. Everywhere you look in our future is going to be a taxed society on every possible facet. Even if you grow your own food, there's probably going to be some tax, because you left a stem in the ground that will decompose and release CO2 or methane. So even your home garden will be taxed on how many root stalks are left in the ground. This gets kind of bizarre, because Oregon right now is trying to remove small farms. If you have anything that has gravel or concrete that is either involved in sheep, rabbit, chicken, geese, duck, cattle, any type of goat, if you have a small farm and there is a pad there made of gravel or concrete that an animal will walk across, they're trying to shut these farms down, saying that there'll be runoff into the environment because of the pad. Now, we have gravel around our chicken area just because when it rains, rain creates poopy sludge, and we don't want to walk in that. So we have gravel down in these areas. Chickens love it because we put grass over the gravel. We put hay over the gravel. They can nibble off the seeds and then at the same time dig it in. So we have the chickens working for us to make a thicker bed. So we use the gravel as the base layer. But in my farm in Tennessee, under the Oregon law, I would be having to install $100,000 worth of infrastructure to control the runoff from the pad, even though we have only 12 chickens. The turkeys, they're in an open area. Well, they're in their own natural area, no padding, so that doesn't fall under the law. But see, the whole thing in Oregon is to try to put the small farmers out of business. If you have 3 dairy cows and you have a milking station, and you obviously don't want to milk them in mud, unhygienic, and you usually have them come into a gravel or a concrete pad to make it sanitary, that counts as falling under the statutes of not controlling runoff from a factory farm. These are like controlled feedlot areas. And Charlie Rankin is really the expert on this. If you want to go to Yanasama Ranch channel on YouTube, he just put out an expose. I think it was about probably 35 minutes, dissecting the individual new laws that are coming out in Oregon on a case-by-case basis on the size of the farm, the type of the pad, whether it be gravel or concrete, and the different types of infrastructure that need to be installed depending on the size and cubic feet of your pad. Well, almost every farm that I know of, including my own, we have gravel and rock in place to stop the muddy areas. But now this is deemed a threat to the ecosystem now suddenly this year. So all small farms have to close or install a minimum of $100,000 in infrastructure to capture that water, then run it through some sort of filters and then clean it. Only that comes off the pad. You could have 100 cattle running out in wild, and just pasture land. That don't need to be controlled at all. Only thing that needs to be is if you have a pad. Now and again, shearing sheep. Are you going to try to get the wool? Are you going to shear a sheep in a muddy field? You got to be kidding me if you're going to do that. Usually it's in a barn. Oh wait, the barn has gravel. Our barn has gravel in it. We got different sizes of gravel. We got pea gravel along the edges, so if there's a maintenance thing, we can easily get in there. But then on top of that, we got, what you consider like number 7s, if anybody out there knows. Everything I've done on my farm would now, under the Oregon law, have hundreds of thousands of dollars of infrastructure for me to install. And this is where it's going: complete control of every aspect of our lives. From the full taxing, now they're going to start taxing your home gardens. They want to tax every single small animal on a home farm under the guise of a feedlot law. Well, I can't tell you, a 20 square foot concrete slab so I can put an animal on there while we wash it, or, milk it, or clean out the pens for it, or whatever, so it's not muddy. Also, that doesn't count as a feedlot, but under the Oregon laws, it does. So the litigiousness, and Ransom and I talked about this before, the litigiousness of this world to do things that governments cannot do in terms of laws because the citizens would say absolutely not. So now you have companies in New York taking Chevron to court because their product puts CO2 in the atmosphere. Not anything that was ever spilled or anything. No, but just your product now creates CO2. Now it's, your farm animals, regardless of the size of your operation, just because you have a square pad, that might run off, or maybe not. This is where they're going. And there's always these test cases in the first states to see if it'll stick. Then what kind of hoops and hurdles they need to come through, because obviously there's going to be, playing tennis with legislation here. Well, the farmers have gotten huge amounts of lawyers up against this. Well, then the state will figure out, or it's not the state, it's a series of NGOs. That's the thing. It's not the state of Oregon that's doing it. It's the NGOs that are doing it, that once the legislation passes, then Oregon State has to enact that legislation. So it's not Oregon going out of their way first to try to shut down the farmers. Oh, no, they love people. But you can see how this works. And then one last point, and I wrote a note here for you, and everybody out there, please take note of this. The squatter laws that are out there. I'll have a personal story. A friend of mine, his name is David, Knoxville, Tennessee. He owns several properties. And this is way before any of this news. This is years ago. Tennessee laws are very strong when somebody gets in your house as a renter. It is almost impossible to get them out for up to 6 months. Even though you're the legal owner, and if you have a contract with them and a rental contract, after day one, they can never pay you their rent, and they'll at least get 6 months free. So a lot of people in Tennessee really don't want to rent to anybody. So if you have anybody staying, just write them not really a rental contract. You just stay here, you maintain the house, but anytime I can ask you to leave within a 24-hour period, because it's not a rental contract. It's sort of a homestay contract, which is different. So a lot of people in Tennessee are moving this direction. So anyway, he's got these tenants. They didn't pay the rent. Because it was one of those block houses from the 1920s where there's 4 or 5 of them in. Renovated it, all brand new stuff, sort of downtown, really nice area. And they had so many noise complaints, the police continually come by. And then he wanted to evict them because they didn't pay rent either. They didn't pay their water, didn't pay their rent. So then the water company's coming back to him going, David, you got to pay the water bill on this. And they're like, well, no, it's the tenant. They're like, no, it's actually you because you're the owner of the building. So they weren't paying their electric, weren't paying their water, weren't paying their rent. Multiple police complaints. And he's like, took them to court. And it took so long because they got lawyers to then battle back against, it's an indigent family. They're going to have to live on the street if you kick them out. Where are they going to go? Blah, blah, blah. Well, anyway, at the very end, it comes down to the last, and the police with sheriff went in there and got them out. They had stolen the light fixtures off the walls. So when my friend went in there to survey the damage, it was a brick interior wall, but on the outside they had sheetrock. They damaged and I mean completely ripped apart all the sheetrock on all the walls that was facing into the brick. Secondly, they ripped out and stole every single fixture. So when they went in, there were just like bare wires sticking out where the sockets were, where the light fit, the light switches were. And then the craziest thing of all was downstairs in the basement, they left a monitor lizard. And because it was really cold down there, the thing was, it was like hibernating. And this is a big monitor lizard. So it was like 4 foot maybe. So he took it up to a vet, and they kind of put some warm fluids into it, and it came back to life. And then they gave him a fully active monitor lizard in a big cage, and they're like, "That's $1,000." He's like, "Whoa!" So he got stuck with a $1,000 vet bill to bring the monitor lizard back to life because they didn't. Animal services are like, "No, it's your lizard. You got to take care of it. If you don't take it to get care right now, we will arrest you for abuse of animals." And this is how he got into the whole thing, having to go take a monitor lizard to get rewarmed up. And then he gets stuck with this big vet bill. And then he's stuck with tens of thousands of dollars of damage And those people walked away for nothing, scot-free, didn't get arrested, nothing. This is what people like that do. Once you get into litigiousness with them, and once they know that they can stay there with these laws that allow them to squat houses, and this is my point, once they start squatting farms, this is going to be the next thing, just like South Africa. The government in states is going to encourage squatters on farms. Now, where the rubber meets the road here in South Africa, they can squat on the land and just start building. They don't have to actually go in and occupy the home residence on the farm. They can squat on the land. So let's say a farmer has 50 acres and part of it's woodlot because they're not, taking it under blade there to grow crops. The woodlot area can actually be staked out and homesteaded on. And the same thing, if they cut one tree to clear the lot to make it a place for homesteading, quote unquote, then they're able to legally stay there. Now, this is encouraged by the government in South Africa to take over the farms. It is not too far of a stretch of the imagination that governments in blue states will also ask, and all these people undocumented that have popped into the country, give them legalese to go squat on farms. Because, hey, you got 25 acres, you're not going to use all of it. You can let a family live on 1 acre, 1 acre, 1 acre. They can take over almost your entire farm if they were to do that 1 acre, 1 acre thing. Put a tent up, well, this 1 acre's mine. Put another tent up for another family, oh, that's their acre. Oh, no, you can't evict them, they're squat. You can't. So somebody's going to have to be on the farms 24/7 to monitor this. And this is where communities come in together here. Because a lot of people, when they're on their farms, some of them are real big, some of them are seasonal. But if these people get in there and are able to put their dirty, grimy paws in for 30 days or 60 days, depending on which state you are, they're legally allowed to hold that land. So it's going to come up to the community to start policing our own farms to make sure squatters are not on there. And then what happens? You come up, they're armed, you're like, get off the land, my friend's land, my father's land. Then what? I mean, what kind of legal rights do you have at that point if a squatter pulls a weapon on you and then that's on your own land or your family's land? And then what? So if you're in a blue state, you're pretty much out of luck. If you're in Tennessee, you have a shooting chance, as they say. But this whole squatter thing needs to be nipped in the bud immediately. This can no longer move out. This is when this happens, this is the society destroyer right there. If you go back through history, every time you lose property rights and those who own nothing can come in and take everything that has been built on for generations, the society crumbles at that point. Pull your villain from history, slot them into the end of sentence, and you could go back. Go for Stalin is a good one. Bolshevik Revolution is another one. Pol Pot would be another one. You could just go on and on and on, and then go to South Africa right now. Go to Cuba. Doesn't matter where you go. Anytime you lose land rights, and those people are just allowed to move into your house or take over your land, the society is finished. You understand this? At that point, it is completely null and void. Which brings us back to the atomization, because if you don't know anybody and you're discombobulated and you just, this news speak where you can't even speak out against what is happening, then there is no community, there is no society. So my word of warning to everybody out there is your communities need to organize to look for squatters on farmlands. And when this happens, immediately evict them and get the sheriffs on board with you to allow you to be deputized across the community, that if you find squatters, everybody that's a farmer should be deputized to be able to remove these squatters no matter how long they've been there at a moment's notice. And everybody has authority under law to remove them, whatever form that takes, and however much energy and effort that takes. They need to be removed. And I know I rambled there, Ransom, but I think that's my thing. And take us out on the break here. And Revolution Radio, thanks for letting us speak tonight. If you consider free speech a thing, please consider a donation here. Revolution Radio, revolution.radio on the website. So, Ransom, what do you think about the squatters, man?
Well,
are they welcome?
Well, no, but you can't do so. Like you said, they've set it up preemptively, and you think about it, 40 million people, estimated 40 million people over the last 20 years have moved in to a population of about 350 million. Well, those people are going to have to be somewhere. And if we've seen anything, we've looked at the trends, not only in Europe, but over here on the East Coast. So you have, and in Chicago, Detroit, different places, they have taken entire buildings, schools, auditoriums, and sometimes even really nice luxury apartment buildings, hotels. And in the case of Europe, have straight up put people into people's homes with them or taken their land, just like you're talking, taking it. And we're not talking about property rights or no legal formalities. They just said, you know what? Here, you're a village with 2,500 people. Here's 16,000 people, deal with them. And then they're in the town and the demographics change. And this gets back over to the Electoral College. This is all connected from the squatters to the benefits that people.
This is Mysteries in the Histories. A mysterious manuscript, roughly 250-page book written in an entirely unknown language and writing system. It's been carbon dated back to the 1400s and includes illustrations of plants that don't resemble any known species, believed to have been intended as a medical text. It's named for the Polish book dealer who purchased it in 1912. This is the mystery of the Voynich manuscript. Since its discovery in 1912, the 15th century Voynich manuscript has been a strange, mysterious cult phenomenon captivating the minds of many. Its first confirmed owner was Georg Barisch, from 1585 to 1662, an alchemist from Prague, who discovered it in his library. Barisch tried to investigate the manuscript's origins to no avail. The manuscript, full of handwriting in an unknown language, zodiac symbols, naked women, and strange objects like unknown plants, seemed to be from another time, or even another world. For centuries, this book repeatedly changed hands. When it was purchased by Voynich, who posited that it was authored by Albertus Magnus, an alchemist, or Roger Bacon, an early scientist. People believed that Voynich himself fabricated the manuscript, although that theory wouldn't explain the carbon dating of the paper and ink to the 15th century. The book itself bears no indication of its authors, about 6 inches by 9 inches, and around 232 pages decorated, not unlike others in the illuminated age. Wrapped in vellum, with vellum pages, the manuscript features 116 folded folios bound in 18 bundles. The binding of the book is old and busted, though it is not original to the text. Many of the pages are fold-outs, some are missing. Inside the tome are innumerable lines of looping text, inked in iron gall in a medium typical of the Middle Ages. Scribbled in a strange, unfamiliar language and a strange, unfamiliar script, incomprehensible, causing Voynich to conclude that the tome was written in code. Alongside the text, unknown if important or decorative, there is an abundance of illustrations and pictorial art. Composed of inks and pigments in tones and color palettes common to the 1400s, these illustrations seem to split the manuscript into 4 separate sections, including sections about botany, astronomy and astrology, balneology, the science of the therapeutic use of baths, and pharmacology, as well as a 5th and final section, with blocks of text separated by stars. The first and largest section of the manuscript is the botany section that contains detailed drawings of plants as if from another world or a lost continent, plants no one can identify and no one has ever seen before. The astronomy and astrology section has illustrations of the stars, the sun and the moon alongside several zodiac signs. Immersed in strange, shared baths, female figures frolic through the pages of the text's balneological section, while the pharmaceutical section is filled with what appears to be medicinal plants, indicated by the inclusion of medicinal bottles throughout this fantastical illustration. Like Voynich, many modern scholars suspect that the manuscript's text is a ciphered form of a familiar language, with their theories of the tome's latent linguistics flitting from Latin to Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs and Toltecs of Mexico. Others say that the text is an artificial language or strange shorthand, and others still see the text as meaningless scribbles. The theories of the tome are, thus, all over the place, with no one opinion snagging widespread support. The Voynich manuscript continues to mystify medievalists and confuse cryptologists centuries after its supposed creation. it remains as impenetrable and inexplicable as ever. But is this truly one of the mysteries in the histories? To find out, sign up for our show notes. Sign up to our show notes email list and get access to longer episodes of Mysteries in the Histories just for signing up. Signing up for the show notes, you get behind-the-scenes thoughts and points we sometimes can't relay over social media platforms. Brought to you by ITM Trading. ITM Trading has spent the last 28+ years developing a team of expert researchers and gold and silver analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn. 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422.
Social Security. Republicans calling for raising the retirement age as Social Security nears insolvency. I think it's going to be insolvent in just a couple of years. So, increasing the retirement age to 69 years old isn't going to do a single thing for somebody who's 20. And those that are even, if they were to raise it today, even somebody who's, let's say, 55, and they're saying, okay, I'm sorry, we have to do a 10-year thing, and then that still wouldn't, it would still be bankrupt. Even if you're, let's say you're 55 today, it would still be bankrupt before you even got it when you're 65 or 67. It's really going to crumble that fast. So it's really at the end of the thing. So this is all just like a smoke and mirrors here thing. Recall, it's just another agitation phase. Ransom called it in the beginning. It's just about agitating. It's done on purpose to create agitation, create different conversations that don't need to be had, because then it misdirects away from the true conversations that need to be had, the true conversations about things that are really important in our society. Not about a program that will be bankrupt in a couple of years, and then you're trying to get younger kids who are 20, 25 years old to squibble over this and distract their energy from preparing for these changes that they're actually going to have to live through for decades in and out of it. Because just going on to the break here, again, Revolution Radio, thank you for allowing us to have free speech and present these conversations. And everybody out there listening, if you consider free speech a thing, revolution.radio, hit that donate tab at the top there in many ways. Crypto is one of them as well, which I wanted to talk about here for just a second to lead us into the second hour. You're going to start hearing about cryptocurrency more and more as Wall Street has adopted it as a new product. It's the fastest inflows of money ever recorded in Wall Street history, by the way. If you're not familiar with it, welcome to being very late to the party. Wall Street is now offering it. Fidelity, every possible investment and retirement fund, investment house, brokerage, wealth management, family office management is all offering this. Sovereign wealth funds, doesn't matter. They're all offering it as a product now, Bitcoin ETFs. The problem is all these companies who are offering these products, exchange traded funds, you don't actually own it. You can buy a portion of it, and as it rises in price, you benefit like a stock. So gold ETFs, you don't have to buy a whole ounce of gold. You could put $100 into the ETF, and you own part of that 1 ounce of gold. And if the price of gold goes up, your $100 goes up a few percent. It's just like owning a stock, but you're owning it in a commodity of a fund that holds large amounts of it, and you can buy a portion of it. It's very much like tokenization of something. So anyway, it's the most amount of money ever going into Wall Street in the fastest amount of time ever recorded. Problem is, now there's 25 Bitcoin ETFs in Wall Street, and they're all vying for the same amount of Bitcoin. Now, currently, the mining across the world kicks out around 25,000 Bitcoin per month. And it's generally around 7,000, 6,500 to 7,000 per week. But some weeks they kick out a little more, 7,500, some weeks a little bit less, around 6,000 Bitcoin per week. So we'll just do an average, I'll say 6,500. But the ETFs are drawing in anywhere between 30 and 35 or 37,000 per week. There's a huge disconnect between the amount of available Bitcoin out on the market and the amount that's coming out of the mining operations. compared to what Wall Street is pulling in. So this last mega crash where everything crashed 10% over the market, you know who was buying as everybody was selling? All the exchange traded funds. They don't care if they get it for 60,000 or 80,000. They just need it because in the long run, they'll make hundreds of thousands off of that. So for them, it doesn't matter what you buy it at. They're just trying to shake it out because there's a shortfall of Bitcoin now. And if it continues, there's about 3 million total Bitcoin out in the market right now. 1.6 million of those Bitcoin are held in storage now at exchange traded funds on Wall Street. We have the miner supply, which is just a trickle, literally a trickle. The rest of the Bitcoin that's out there is being held by like exchanges that have to have a certain amount so they can run their regular exchange for cryptocurrencies. There's other people who have cold wallets that have never moved. Once they bought it, it's in there. It's a lifetime investment. It's a retirement fund investment. It's never coming back to the market to see light of day, except in very, very small increments. After it reaches probably $1 million, people will start unloading some of it. There's very limited amount of this Bitcoin that's out there. The wallet addresses that have held and haven't moved anything for quite some time. So that full calculation is 3 million available Bitcoin. 1.4 million has already been bought up since the frenzy of the exchange traded funds. And they predict that within 6 months, the other 1.6 million Bitcoin will be totally bought up and under the cold wallets and off exchanges, never to be sold again, exchange traded funds. They have to have it or else they can't operate their product on Wall Street. So it will never come back to the market once Wall Street swoops it. It will be completely in a hard wallet, never to see the light of day again. So the amount of shift of economy that is going to occur right now, I can't say it enough again. A couple previous shows ago, I was saying that the 0.25% of interest in your local bank account, those people moved it up into money markets that gave them 5%. But now Bitcoin ETFs are looking at 50% or 100% return on the money as we move through this next year, year and a half. So huge outflows have taken away from the money markets and moved into the Bitcoin ETFs. The siphoning of money out of our normal banking system, quote unquote, from that 0.25% into mutual funds was devastating for several banks. We saw many bank collapses. And since our last program on the 11th of March, the federal government will no longer offer our banks in America emergency funding to stop their bank runs. So as we move forward from this point, if there is another set of huge, gigantic movement of money from one place to another because of a better interest rate, this time those banks will fail. And that is predominantly small regional banks that will get no bailout from our government. That emergency funding program is done. So then you ask yourself, why did they do that at the same time that this ETF was kicking off, that they knew it would be a giant black hole for money taking out of our traditional banking system? It's almost like Ransom said, being set up to fail on purpose. What do you think the purpose of that would be? To destroy our banking system, offer no bailouts for regional banks, and let everything cascade. Again, it would cascade on Wall Street because they offer shares out there, equities for their banks that are listed on, Wall Street. Then what? The banks collapse themselves, so the depositors lose their money in a bail-in. The stock prices collapse, so those who are investors that actually don't have money in the bank still lose because the bank collapsed down to near zero and they stopped trading it, so you can't even sell it for 1 penny because it doesn't trade any longer. The wipeout is almost purposeful. And Ransom, I'd like to, why do you think they would do this at this critical juncture right this second? Food shortages? Move to a digital currency. You have to do this before you can get your food ration on a digital rationing card. And why all the squatting laws are coming in right now at the same time with very little litigation or possible maneuvering from a homeowner to get those people out of there. I don't know, it's so many pieces of the puzzle, but they're all, being funneled into this cattle chute at the exact same time for the maximum destruction of a society. I don't know, but I know you have something to add in there, a couple more pieces that I'm not seeing, because I only see what I see. So please help me get a wider vision and a wider out. I need to take off the horse blinders. Help.
I think a lot of this is just the way it's been in the past, like with Enron and other things, where they know that the majority of the public don't really understand the financial systems, and those that do, they don't realize how much of it's controlled that they don't see, like with algorithms, with governments doing things. And then you have in the private sector people purposely sinking ideas or pumping up ideas that they know are going to fail later because they know they can transfer all the money away. And with the food situation, that seems like that will be the very last card that they pull. Right now, like I said, we're in the destabilization phase. They got to get everybody distracted with mediocre problems in their personal lives, at the same time as, clog up their mind with all of these giant problems that seemingly you can't do nothing about. Like if you're sitting around worried about nuclear war, what would you do about it? Nothing is the answer. It's like sitting around worried about an asteroid hitting the Earth. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. So those are the things that, they like to fill everyone's head with. And, I like to imagine about the past and when these actual events have happened. So it's not like that they wouldn't happen. But if you can get everybody completely demoralized and thinking that things are so bad, they don't try, they don't invest, they don't come up with things. They lose their ingenuity, they lose their creativity. And I think that's the main thing. What's going on is they want to destroy the mentality first. And in order to do that, you have to have a lot of upheaval and, change in culture. Well, everything's different now. You can't do that anymore. You're bad for being old school or whatever it is. I mean, they keep doing that. It's endless amounts of divisions to keep people distracted while all of the wealth is stolen. And at the same time, if you think about why would they really ever come up with squatters' rights in the first place? It doesn't make any sense. It never would have made sense, even if you were renting. I mean, like if it was that way, our economy would have crashed a long time ago. If a renter could just do whatever they wanted to the house, stay in it, maybe even possibly own it later without paying their rent that they agreed to pay, which means that contracts are null and void and meaningless. They know that all of this chaos will keep people losing their wealth. They'll lose their power because their wealth is their power. And then when they just crash the money, it kind of evens the playing field for a lot of people unless they have hard assets, which were what? Property, right? Property and things on the property would be the backup money. And if you can't even, know that your assets are going to be yours in the future or that they're going to be stable, like your land per se, then all bets are off. I mean, where do you put your wealth into if not even private property is sacred to your own government and they don't care? And then with millions of more people, you know that there is going to be an inevitable point in which it does I don't know how to say it. It doesn't go around as much. There's not enough to go around, meaning there's just not enough jobs. There's just not enough social services. There's just not enough food being produced. And then that's just internally within each nation, especially ours. I'm mostly talking about ours because I don't think I don't know what the numbers are, but I think the United States has taken in like, I don't know, 10 new states worth of people, 20 new metropolitan cities worth of people. And people don't understand how much that changes unless you go over and you look at the microcosms happening in Europe, where they've already ignored the idea of private property and taken away people's private property, given them situations that would never be allowed in a normal civilization, where you have people coming in and they're telling you, you know what, you have to move off. Now, what's the difference between that and an invading army? The only difference is that the governments are the ones that are pushing the sword of conquest instead of, the outside forces. They're just taking the benefit. And why wouldn't they? I mean, if you think about this, and in my opinion, it's going to be looked back in history as the great bait and switch, the great bait and switch of our times, right? Because they've told everybody that this is what you'll get, this is how you'll get it. And most of those people have come from places where communism and socialistic ideas have already destroyed where they came from. And weirdly, it seems like right now, if you were to invest in land and future, projects, you would be going where all of the people that are coming are leaving from. Think about this. So if anything happens as far as a worldwide conflict, all of the male people in each country will live in a different place, and the numbers of them will be diminished. And traditionally, that would have been the firewall against tyranny in each and every localized area anywhere, because men would protect where they live. They would protect their property. They would protect their country. They would protect their family. But if you can dissolve, destroy, and get rid of the whole idea of family within a couple of generations, then this idea of what's the reality. And think about this. They have been beating us over the head with climate change and overpopulation for decades and decades. And now just read like world population is going to fall for the first time since the Black Death. No big deal. And you read into it and it talks about other things, contributing factors like not growing enough food or combat zones. Or the main thing is, why is the planet all of a sudden going infertile? Global fertility rates continue to keep plummeting. Major study warns. And when you get down into what it's talking about everywhere. And they're admitting by 2050, which is the decade I said, the population of 3/4 of all countries will be shrinking. And it's not just because of fertilization. It's because people aren't trying to do that anymore. They're lost in the rat race that they've created of the world, of everybody trying to hold on to their traditional and inherited wealth, lifestyles, and cultures, while they dissolve that around them, knowing that that will cause conflict and strife. They know that. So they're doing that on purpose to destroy the concept of a nation state, and then smaller than that, a community, and then all the way down to the family and just a free individual human being. That's what's being attacked and dissolving around the world. The parameters of everything you know about what you think you know about the world is now being replaced with fake information, fake histories, fake propaganda, and fake ideas of the future. But the reality is a kind of a harsher one in the background, and they know it. And they've had plenty of time with their think tanks and people with big brains, big IQs, knowing that all this was going to happen while they were putting out the propaganda of overpopulation and destroying the planet and climate, blah, blah, blah. Turns out we're kind of, we haven't really got hot in a long time, and it's continuing to get colder. They didn't even start counting, the supposed change in the climate until the last little bit, and they expect you to ignore all of history and just focus in on this little bit of things while they give you this play-by-play of a fictional situation. We're overpopulated and blah, blah, blah. But now they don't care. They can go ahead and tell you because they have the answers to these problems already. They already have plans to give you the cure for whatever, problematic environment that they create, which we know what that is. And that's inner city, urban, heavily toxified, infertile populations that decrease over time, while all of the arid land out there, the farmable land, the livable land that would keep you as a healthy human being. And I might, conject that you would probably be fertile also if you just ate off the land instead of from their industrial combines. But here we go. And then, on top of that, what do we need is just one big worldwide conflict to go ahead and sink the ship of civilization. We know that's what they're doing. The question is will we be around, and what will we do to survive the changeover? How will we survive the cycle going forward? And I think what it is what we've talked about many times is we still are in a position to say no. We're still in a position to vote with whatever resources we have left, like the dollar. And if all else fails in the future, you always have the other boxes that people have voted from in the past, which is first the ballot box, And then the ammo box, that's, our founding fathers believed in that. If you don't believe me, go read the Federalist Papers. And then, that's a good idea for anybody in our time, is to go read the Federalist Papers, and then you won't be confused on what the Constitution means, especially in the time where they're trying to change every amendment in there. And what it is that they're attacking, it's not necessarily the United States itself, but the whole way of life insinuated back in 1776 that we, just because of being born, have inalienable rights, and part of those rights are to be able to protect ourselves, our property, and our family, the main firewall against tyranny. And, even in the grand scheme of things, I don't know where this is going to lead, but, on top of all the infertility and declining populations, they are tracking the disappearance of the Y chromosome altogether, and they figure in a few hundreds of thousands of years there won't be. And it makes you wonder if that has something to do with a longer term plan that they know about themselves, a design. This is no big deal to the people. When you look at these babies in the incubators and they realize that less and less children are being born, not unlike a science fiction movie, by the way, The Children of Man, if you've ever watched that. They have no idea in the movie why, but, everybody stops being able to make babies, and then the world just turns into concentration camps, basically, of barely functioning democracies as their financial systems collapse, because there's no hope in the future. There's no reason to invest in anything. And they know that, but that's okay, because they now can create human-like entities to fill the gap where humankind once existed. And this change will be slow, but not as slow as you think. Your grandchildren and children may actually get to see this world. And, if they're complacent like people are today, there's no way to stand a chance against it. But right now, just like any other thing, when you plan ahead, you are literally changing the future. It's like time travel. It's like putting a seed in the ground. You know that food is going to be there if you take the time and effort, but it all starts with the first thought. And that first thought of manifestation is where we have them at a disadvantage. We can manifest what we want, and that starts by everyday actions. What am I going to do today? I'm going to improve my house. I'm going to plant some food. And that's what you should be asking yourself every day, regardless of the financial markets, the volatility of the geopolitical environment. How are you going to make your life and your family's life better today? And once you start doing that every day, incrementally, your life becomes better, and those around you too. And that's how all of us need to think. And the only way to do that is to fight this cartel of authoritarianism that starts at the local level. So if you can get your local area, the police, the city councilors, the mayors, the whatever it is that runs the area, to know who you are, where you live, and that you're not going to stand for certain things as a collective, as a community, then it doesn't happen. And if it doesn't happen locally, it can't happen statewide or nationally or nation to nation. And that's the power we have against them, unless they, decide that, like they have in the past. Here's some examples. In the U.S., there was some, tension going on because the United States selling off land and properties and moving people off of those properties using the BLM as a force for international forces, I'll just put it that way, that wanted to take land, use land. So they were using the BLM, and this guy named Floyd, right, got killed in this whole dispute. But don't worry about it. Right when that was coming to a head and getting nationally recognized and it was starting to be a movement, all of a sudden a new BLM showed up and another guy named Floyd showed up that erased all of that into the internet. Right. And then you can go back to like 2001, where there were anti-war protests all over the world like no other. And then, boom, we went to war, patriotism. They questioned people's patriotism, and that disappeared. And then there was you remember the Occupy Wall Street movement that was grassroots. And before long, that got taken over and all kinds of money got stolen and transferred at that time too. But you were distracted with the things. I think things are really going to change. And then they just changed the narrative. And like lemmings jumping off a cliff, the entire public follows whatever the newest thing is, whatever it is. Is it Israel? Is it Ukraine? Do I I have to follow this thing? Do I have to wear my pin? I don't know if you've ever watched that old Seinfeld where they were wearing the little red pins to support HIV, and Kramer didn't want to wear the ribbon, and all of the people got mad because he wouldn't wear the ribbon and do what everybody else is doing with the latest thing, and they chased him down and ended up beating him up over just not wearing or supporting the latest thing. And we're exactly at that point. We're like in the Matrix. The people we're trying to free are the same people that will turn against you and support the tyrannical system. So you can't change people's minds by arguing with them. You have to change their minds by example. And that example is what I was talking about. How do you improve first your life and your family's life? And then once you get in a routine of doing that every day, then you can think about how can I help my neighbor, my community, my friends, and then your nation as a whole. And that's my opinion on it. I think there is a big way out of it, but people have to not be complacent and realize that certain programs and agendas are out there. They are active and they are anti-human, which is you. So you have to combat that with your own lifestyle change, prepping and navigating the new system.
Yeah, I saw that Kramer episode. That was kind of a funny one with Seinfeld there. What is the next thing? And then we have to kowtow to, as they would say, or kowtow to. Because you mentioned the bubonic plague, and it was actually interesting because I had been reading an article off of sot.net, which is a website called Sign of the Times. This one comes off Live Science here. A 3,300-year-old tablet from a Hittite empire describes catastrophic invasion of 4 cities. And I thought, well, all right, let's see if this matches up on my grand solar minimum 400-year destruction timeline. Sure enough, bubonic plague. Black Death, 14th century, Justinian plague, 6th century. And then what they were finding in this article was the bubonic plague couldn't be followed and spread through fleas in all these parts of the world where they started to see this same thing pop up. But what they found, in addition to what we know as bubonic plague for the 14th century, 6th century, is you got to roll this thing back, and they found other episodes of it 3,300 years ago. And then they started to find also on 400-year intervals ravaging cities. Not entire countries or continents, which you think a disease of that magnitude would ravage. But it was very specific in the cities it would ravage. And this is what the whole story is about, is how this area of the country got ravaged by bubonic plague, but the next county over, for an example, in today's lingo, had nothing happen to it. So they're like, it couldn't have been the fleas. So there must be some other explanation to why this is happening. And then they're also pinging it to 400-year intervals. And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of interesting. I wonder if it has anything to do with, solar activity or changes of that, or movement of peoples, migration of animals due to, changing food availability. If the sun changes, obviously, other things are going to migrate as well. Magnetic field on the planet is going to move at that time, so the food source is going to move also. We're watching a lot of movement of the same things happening right now. So I thought that was interesting because then it pops back, and then they trace it back to Oman, because the Hittite culture, quite famous about 5,000 years prior, up around Petra in Jordan. So when they follow the trace back of these stories of selectively targeted city areas ravaged by bubonic plague that did not hit a whole country, a whole region, they have these hot spots, and they trace the last one down to Oman. And I thought that's interesting. So they have different spots. So 2,900 years ago, it was in Oman. 3,300 years ago, it was in the Hittite civilization area, what we now know as Jordan. And they just kind of walk you through these different devastation periods. And I thought that's quite interesting to bring me up to the Hutus or the Houthis, because that same area here around Oman and Yemen, you got to wonder what's going to be happening there. Because here we got a new Newswire clip, because I'm trying to wrap all this economy and shipping into the grand solar minimum, the crop losses, because think about it as a world government, you're never going to tell the truth that the sun is causing the changes to the food production and limiting food production. So next year we'll have less food regardless of the mechanisms we try, unless we steal a bunch of land on the equator and start turning all these cities and farmlands and highways and roads into farms along the equator, 20 north to 20 south, because there's people that live there. Oh, wait, used to live there, my bad. So it's playing straight into this same thing. The shipping disruptions need to explain away your food supply disruption. It will never be blamed on the sun or a natural mechanism. 6 ways from Sunday, it was the squatters that disrupted farms. It was the traders, they ran the prices up too high. Oh, we're at war with China, so the fertilizer never got delivered. Well, now we're at the beginning of it, of the soft approach, shall we say. Oh, it's the Red Sea's blocked. So now we got this new article coming out just an hour ago. The Houthis reassure Russia and China on Red Sea transit routes in exchange for political support. And I said, that's super interesting. What does that mean? U.S., get your fingers out of there is what it means. The Houthi spokesperson met with the China and Russia delegations in Oman. And what they did was they reached an agreement. Yemen's National Salvation Government, NSG, reached an understanding about the safe passage through the Red Sea. Now, what they're saying is any ship that's flagged from China or Russia will no longer be molested, not even a chance. They have a code word or whatever they put in there, and you're able to pass through on the radio contact. In exchange for agreements on National Security Council with Russia and China that they'll block any type of aggression toward Yemen. So if the U.S. can unilaterally move on nations and block others' opinions about destruction, I guess 2 saying no against something is better than 1. So that's the trade-off. So you're going to watch this as a major, major constriction point. Now it seems only friendly nations, those 2, Russia, China, are going to be able to sail freely. Everything else will either have to be stopped, boarded, or get permission to move through the Red Sea, or it will be sunk, because with this agreement also, they're going to receive hypersonic missiles. One shot, ship sunk. That type of hypersonic missile blowing in at 10,000 miles an hour, ripping your metal hull to shreds. I wonder how many hulls will lay at the bottom of the Red Sea, maybe choking off the seaway before long. If they're all sunk in the exact same area, you could create a bottleneck. What kind of marine salvage operation would that take? And oh, the environmental destruction. Oh, the oil that's spilling all over. Oh, it's the Houthis who spilled all the oil across the Red Sea. It was never all the actual oil and oil tanker leakages coming out of the Straits of Hormuz, was it? Nope. Watch how they rewrite history too. All the economic or ecological devastation will be blamed on the Houthis, not the regular oil production coming out of the Middle East. And it's just so predictable now. It's laughable on how these things are going to move. And you mentioned the BLM, and I've followed that for a while here. We are not talking about Black Lives Matter. We're talking about the Bureau of Land Management. And you tiptoed around it, but I'm not going to. That now deceased sleazy congressman / senator, his son was also involved. The cover story was the Bundy Ranch. They wanted to confiscate the land and put up a Chinese-backed solar farm on top of that. And you're like, well, that's kind of crazy why they'd scrape all that land away and then put a solar farm there on family lands that have been in the same family for 200 years. But in the fine print, which nobody really read about, all the soil that was going to be leveled off of that project area was going to be sent back to China. You know why? Because it was an old gold mining area, heavily rich in like very fine flakes of gold. Because it was on public lands like that, nobody on the private side could get mining operation leases out there because it was in the BLM hands, and it was on private water rights with families, again, going back several hundred years. So what did they do? They tried to use the green agenda to come in and get into somebody's private land, They're saying that the Bundys were destroying the land by letting cattle run on it, but then their 55 neighbors from Sunday were also letting cattle graze out there. But the whole guise of it was bringing in the Chinese entities to put up a massive, it was going to be the largest solar farm in America. But the whole thing was they were going to scrape the top 6 to 15 feet of that land off, containerize it, send it back to China, and then do the refining process and separate gold ore out of that topsoil / rock layer rock layer. That was going to be one of the largest mining operations of transference of Earth from one point of our planet to another in human history. They were going to move equally as much as the size of one great pyramid off of that land to scrape it. We were talking square miles for the solar farm. Of course, on public lands in the United States, they wouldn't give our own companies mineral exploration rights to go in there and actually set up and mine for the gold itself to bring that into our own gold deposits in America. No, the sleazy politicians were allowing the Chinese to mine our soils and containerize it with that gold in it and send it back to China, all under the guise of setting up a green energy program. See, another thing, when you looked at the contour maps, if anybody's into topography maps or topo maps, part of that operation was coming off Bundy's property also. But if they would have really cared about the environment as they claimed they did, they would have moved the project some several miles back into a square open field plain area. But what they did is they decided to take that entire, we're talking square miles of solar panels, and shove it up against the mountains on a south-facing mountain and mine that entire mountain face off with known gold reserves in there with the washout, in those washouts in the streams, and where all the gold would be concentrated in those washouts where individual prospectors could go in there and do it, but there was no commercial operations. To be able to mine, scrape, cut, and completely take away the rock face off the mountain, all layers of rock, all soils, containerize it, and that's what I'm saying. That was nothing more than a politician in America being bought and paid for by the Chinese to then steal the gold out of American lands. And Harry Reid was responsible for that, and he was allowing that to move forward. That's when those people came together and said, no. And then, Obama sent all of our troops into, Obama at that time sent American troops in to put down those people supporting the Bundys, and we're going to fire on American citizens if needed to. But there were so many others that hundreds and thousands of people were out there that it really came down to that very last second. It was almost like a Cuban Missile Crisis. And you saw those guys armed to the teeth, rolling up with their heavy equipment against a bunch of guys on horseback. And when it came down to that point that nobody backed off in America, none of the individuals out there backed off, that Obama had to make that choice. You shoot everybody live on TV or you back the BLM out of there and the BLM enforcers. Watching that go live down on TV and watch David Knight live there on the scene with that, with the Bundys there, when they all came in and watched the government pack up and back up slowly and everybody's, yeah, get out of here, explicatives. They had special operations forces going, yeah, we'll open the fences for you. And the Bundys were like, no, we're going to open our own gates. Get out of here. But they had special operators. They had American operators in there on our own people. That's what went down. And there was enough pushback against it that nothing happened. Well, it was an embarrassment for Obama because he thought he could send a bunch of our American troops against the American citizens and show how tough he was. But when the Americans stood up and thousands of them surrounded what would be, that push in with our American troops, and they backed off. They had to. That would have started something that would have been unstoppable. That you had American forces fire on American people so Chinese could steal the gold out of the ground in America. Are you kidding me? Really? At that point, that was the closest we'd come to something setting off since the Civil War in the 1860. The Fort Sumter type of event was right there, but at lower caliber than a cannon, but at much closer range with thousands of cameras on it. It would have been a day that which would have lived in infamy. If you thought the Pearl Harbor footage was interesting to watch, if that BLM guys, if the BLM and forces on the American government side would have started shooting into those guys on horses, that would have been a day you would never forget. And it would have sparked something in the country, which we would not be living in the same nation right now had that event happened. But it came down to they were with yards of each other, guns drawn, automatic weapons pointing at other American citizens. And then Obama called them off. Had to. And that's when the BLM shifted, because that Bureau of Land Management got such a black eye that American citizens come together and unite in large amounts and push back government overreach. And I'm not overreach, I mean overreach, capital O. That it sent a huge flag up. Hey, this is the way it needs to be done. But then you hit it on the head, man. That whole BLM movement got usurped. Now, if you say BLM, nobody understands Bureau of Land Management. They all think the flags out there in school classrooms across the United States and the world. Or BLM, the people kneeling on stadiums before games and things. Bureau of Land Management disappeared from our lexicon. And I wonder why. See, Ransom, you hit it on the head. I know it's a little long-winded explanation. You tiptoed around it, but I didn't want to, because I witnessed that live, and I knew exactly what happened. And if they try to whitewash it these days, it's a little bit difficult for somebody who saw the event go down live than it is to say, no, it didn't happen. You know, a little bit different.
Yeah, and if you really think about that hard, it doesn't take someone's imagination too much to stretch to realize that there was a big thing that was happening, but they weren't ready for it to happen. And just like you said, there would have been a Civil War type situation where people would have felt more for their American citizens than the overreaching government, who was the BLM. But all of a sudden they got a facelift and a remake, and the type of people that were standing up for farms and stuff. And remember, it wasn't just the gold. They were going to resell all the land when they were done doing that to put up Chinese-owned solar farms there too. So in order to protect the turtles, we got to protect the turtles. We're going to cover the whole land with, we're going to tear it up first, and then, we're going to put some solar panels on it. Don't worry about it. And you notice that as soon as that, like you said, it came critical, and that was exactly my point. It went critical where the government looked like the bad guys, and people were starting to see that there was an overreaching presence of world governance to try to steal land and resources from the American people outright, in your face. And then all of a sudden, within months after that, and remember, a guy named Floyd got killed, not the one you're thinking about, but a different guy, Floyd. And all of those type of people that were saying that they were patriots and, farmers and good old boys, and that whole idea of, horseback flying the flag, they got their revenge with January 6th, where they made all of those people, and they try to frame them as insurrectionists, racists, fascists, all of these different names, and they replaced the BLM with a different group that made headlines for 2 years so that everyone under a certain age wouldn't even know about the other stuff, and everybody that was barely paying attention, it got rebranded in their mind. BLM, Floyd. Oh, that guy. The guy that died, right? So they totally erased that, and I don't think that just a random line of events happened to come out just like that. I think there was a little bit to that, especially even if the guy randomly was another person with the name Floyd in their name. The media ran with it. So BLM and Floyd, those two search terms, right now, I guarantee you, if you went to any search engine, that's what you're going to get if you try to look up the other incidents regarding that. And nobody's hearing about the BLM at all, but they think we're really stupid. And I wanted to show you this. This is kind of like the eclipse changing the gravity or something like that, because the shadows going across the ground, like a lot of people believe. Here they expect you. I don't know why they're doing this, because we all that are paying attention know that the magnetic field around the earth has been collapsing and reversing, and it does that every so often. But we're in the process of that right now. And according to this article right here from the Metro, dead satellites falling to Earth could weaken its magnetic field. Do you really believe that the amount of stuff that we put up is going to change the magnetic field around the Earth? No, it's already happening, but they're preemptively giving these dumb ideas for people to have heard of and think that they understand it in the back of their mind. When satellites start falling from the sky, which a lot of people are talking about now because that's going to happen. A lot of the old stuff is going to be falling down, lithium-ion batteries, all kinds of stuff falling out of the sky. If you're so lucky to be, it's very not likely, but if it were so to happen, fall on your property and start fires or, kill you on the ground, it's very possible. But they're going to be explaining everything that's coming up in the next couple of decades as something other than what it actually is. Why wouldn't they just tell people that en masse that, well, our magnetic field's doing this thing. We might have certain problems, especially if the sun burps out a CME in our direction at the same time as our magnetic field is somewhat collapsed. That might do something, that we here on Earth won't like because it'll mess up everything going on. But I don't really think that's going to happen. But it's weird how they have preemptive stuff out there to explain what's going on. And, on top of that, think about what that Bundy thing was really, really about. It was about who really owns your property. Does the U.S. government own your property? And via them, the world government own your property? Because that's the argument that keeps coming back, right? And now they have that solved. If we just want to get deep into it, for decades, people were realizing that there was an agenda 2020, agenda 2030. And now those same people, if they live long enough and are still out there dealing with it, have realized that all of that stuff has come to fruition. So it's happening. They've done it. They're doing it. So you have to ask yourself then, if that's going on, then that means there's always been a coordinated attack to remove your rights as a human being, not only one, but also as a national citizen, a sovereign citizen of a nation that has laws. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier in Europe, where they're just, you got a house, you got 3 empty rooms, here's 20 migrants, move them in your house. No, but they're doing the same type of thing here, but they were doing it already. So it's not really the influx of people that they're going to let have any properties or something. They're just going to let them get it in a point where it's in legal argument. And when that happens everywhere, at the same time, all of these companies are slowly, incrementally, and I mean the realtor companies and the major real estate companies and the government itself and other governments and billionaires are buying up every single piece of property that there is. Now, if they were going to do that and continue to do that, you can see that it wouldn't take but a couple decades for the amount of available private property, amount of available living space to shrink, and in specific areas, those areas that they don't want people in anymore, obviously. So they want to get rid of the single family home and cram everybody into little micro houses that are stacked upon each other. And why are they doing that? Well, it's a slow management of the overall population of Earth declining, and they're going to have to explain why. And people are going to be mad when they realize what's happened to them over the past couple of decades. Now, some people are awake to it. Some people understand it, that everything is toxified, from the soil we grow our food in to the rain that falls on your head. It's full of stuff. And I don't know if you saw that, but Tennessee just passed a law banning geoengineering in their state. Now, I don't know what you think about that, but, it's just weird, some of the things that are finally coming out to the surface of discussion when it's too late, when most of those things have already happened. And people are worried about stuff falling out of the sky, but ignore the real geoengineering, the real chemtrails that are happening, which is being sprayed over your crops yearly. And those crops are starting to fail. And those crops are vulnerable because they're a genetic bottleneck of invented species of genetically altered things that are susceptible to just going, having a bad time. And I think that exactly was the plan. And I say that because I've read a lot with Bill Gates and is climate sensitive crops that they create, right? So they've created all of these crops, and they've gone to all the major countries that produce food. They've bought up land. They've sold these genetically modified crops that are very, vulnerable to the environment. So if there's drought or other things, and they sell it like, no, this is going to help you. And then that country replaces all of the natural stockpiles of seeds that they were using before the GMO era. And now it's even more so, where it's like gene spliced CRISPR technology. And now they're using different forms of mRNA. And I'm not talking about messenger RNA. I'm talking about modified RNA. And they're changing all of these foods. So what happens when all of that stuff fails if the climate tilts one way or the other? Well, what happens is mass starvation, and then an exponential die-off of the main population of the world. And I know that, I keep bringing this up, but is that not the plan that they gave us and put up in every single language on earth right there for anybody and everybody to go take a look at and read, where it said that they were going to drop the population down to about 500 million and keep it out of nature and let nature be nature, a well-balanced thing. And you got to remember, these are the descendants of people that used to own the land, and you're nothing more than an obstacle or a squatter on their land. That's how they feel. And these are the people that own the world. And I know there's new players like Bill Gates and Soros and all of these other people, but you got to remember that there were families of what would be billionaires in any era, equivalent to today, that already owned everything, that already ran everything, that already had a hand in the banks, the printing of the monetary money. And now that they're ready to switch over to a completely algorithm-based AI system, now they need a digital currency where they don't have to micromanage inflation and stagflation and, printing money and the exchange of money between countries where people have made a lot of money besides them. And that's what really gets under their skin whenever they create these programs to take advantage of the citizenry. But then the citizenry catches on and little markets open up to do the same thing. They have to end those things. The same thing happened with cryptocurrency. It popped up. Governments didn't like it, but now that they got their hooks in it and they want to go in the same direction, they're ready to run with it because it fits into their program of a completely track and trace reduced population and their technocratic system they're building from the ground up. And in order to do that, you have to destroy what's there. That's what every single corporation usually does when they buy a property with a building on it that's older. They destroy it, they fire all the employees, they get rid of everything that was anything to do with it, and they start from the ground up from a new foundation. And right now they're building that foundation. That foundation is the end of inalienable rights in any form, in any country, and replaced with a technocratic system that is the caregiver from birth to death, from cradle to grave. And in that system, they have it allotted where if you behave right, you'll get benefit and get to play in the system. If you don't act right, you might not get your ration card, and you might not get the benefits promised to you by moving into one of these first world countries that will go to that system first. So what I'm saying is if you could convince, millions upon millions of people, let's say billions of people all added together, to move from their country of origin where they have room, resources, but for one reason or another, their country has never claimed that right or produced those resources or created a civilization to match, which we all know has been influenced by the first world powers or CIA and things like that for some time. So they never got to get there. They convinced those people that would not normally voluntarily be tracked down and biometric and put into the system. And they promised them goods and services and, free stuff and a better life. And look what these guys are doing. And they're doing it on, because you're not having it. And they convince everybody to move. And then they invest in those empty areas. So like right now, you can look in the investment world and they're all moving to Costa Rica, or Guatemala, or places like that, because they see the way that the trend is turning, where there's going to be a bunch of unused, unproduced land where they have just removed the military-aged men, the masculine men from those countries for the promise of whatever it is that convinced them or enticed them to go. And now areas that are closed off and concentrated, and those same first world countries will then have to go to war to keep their economies afloat because they're all purposely being destabilized and destroyed from within.
Get off the king's land. You are taking a pheasant. You are sentenced to death. I did read about the Tennessee law to ban geoengineering. In my opinion, it is nothing more than every time it is stated that they run through why geoengineering is used to stop runaway global warming. And in the text of every policy paper that you read about it, it always states geoengineering is used to stop global warming, to stop greenhouse gases from warming the planet and reflect particles back into space. It's just nothing more than a reinforcer of greenhouse gases cause climate to get warmer. But now all eyes on it. So when you read it, the whole thing is like, yes, we need to stop the particulates in the atmosphere, but these particulates around the world are being used to mitigate global warming, to actually stop the sunlight from bouncing off and back up to space because the greenhouse gases are warming the planet. And it's just a reinforcement of greenhouse gases warm planet. Now all eyes can reinforce that again. And really, they don't even mention any of the metals or the compounds used in any of the aerial disbursement. Not a single atom is mentioned. They don't talk about aluminum in a non-binded state, because in the earth, aluminum is always bound with something else. So unbound aluminum is always a manufactured product. So what I'm trying to say, there's no barium, there's no strontium mentioned. They don't even identify if it's commercial aircraft or military aircraft. It's such a vague thing. All it is a propaganda piece. You say, yeah, we're telling planes to stop spraying. We don't know what to spray. We got to stop. Because the reason that everybody else is doing it is because it's global warming to stop the sunlight from hitting the surface of the planet. That's all it is. It's what? Kitty float meters to read. It's still better than
Thank you for listening to Revolution.
Signing off here with Ransom Godwin.